Hey, it's Sam, and I'm talking about this Pluto in Capricorn shift that we're dealing with now. Pluto in Sidereal Capricorn. A few big things have happened, and I'm also going to talk about the last four Pluto shifts from Virgo to Libra, Scorpio, and Sagittarius, so we can really get a feeling for what the Pluto shifts into the sidereal signs mean. So this is really cool. We're going to do a little history lesson, and we're going to see where we're going with Pluto in Capricorn now that it's really set up. We're also going to look at the USA chart, as you see here, the original USA chart from 1776 and where we are now. So check this out. Okay, so here we are, and as you see, I'm looking at this. This is the chart of the U.S. And just a little get this size just right. This is July 4, 1776, right? At about 5:30 in the afternoon. This is when I have that the USA, the ascendant as Scorpio. I'm going to do another video at some point updating my previous prediction or my previous video that I did last year, talking about how I believe the USA chart is actually a Scorpio ascendant, not a Sagittarius ascendant, as many Vedic astrologers think it's Sagittarius. I think Scorpio works much better. Couple reasons, which I'm not going to get into so much in this video. But either way, July 4th, 1776, you see Pluto was 6 degrees of Capricorn and retrograde. And now you see here, this is a chart of today, February 17th, Pluto is at 1 degree of Capricorn. So the USA is having its Pluto return. And that's quite something, right? The US is having its Pluto return. And so what this means is that the last time Pluto was here in the sky is when the US was just being birthed. It was the birth of us as a nation. So this is the first Pluto return. It takes this long for Pluto to go around the chart. And again, in Vedic astrology, Pluto is not one of the main planets, because it's not visible, and, to the naked eye. And, but I do see Uranus, Neptune, and Pluto as being applicable, particularly when we get into mundane astrology, where we're looking at world events and we're looking at large cycles. There are a couple cycles right now that are really big. One is also the Uranus-Neptune cycle, which I'm going to be talking about in an upcoming video as well, especially, again, for social and cultural shifts, again, because they're longer cycles. And I would never say that they don't work in personal charts or whatever either, but they're not part of classical Vedic astrology, because the classical Vedic astrology is actually showing the karmas that are happening, like the physical stuff, not the more they're even called the transcenturnian planets, which are beyond form necessarily, and they're working in a kind of in a larger cultural sense, not a personal sense. Now, again, this doesn't mean they don't work in that way or what have you. This isn't going to be a dissertation on using outer planets or not. Like I say, I think it's fine and totally legitimate for people to do whatever they want. But it's not part of classical Vedic astrology, because we also have classical rulerships. By the way, it's also not part of classical Western astrology, because they didn't start being discovered until around the 1800s, right? So you don't see any of these outer planets in Greek astrology or the Persians or anything like that, because they hadn't been discovered yet. So classical systems of astrology work just fine without them. They absolutely do. And again, if astrologer can't really make their system work without it, they're probably not trained very well in the classical system. Just leave that aside. It's not a judgment. It's just a statement. So, and we know this to be true because we know when those planets were discovered, and we know astrology is much older than that. So either way, what we can glean, though, from Pluto is these large cultural shifts, these large ideas and concepts. And in this context, the way I come at it is maybe a little bit different than what others say. And it's not that others, again, are right or wrong. And in fact, this also works in with what other astrologers would also say. I would say Western astrologers about Pluto and how to how to evaluate it. Again, many people do everything personally, where Pluto is a personal planet and how personally we're experiencing Pluto or whatever. I'm looking at this more in cultural ways, and I'm going to try to distill its essence down a little bit. But before I get into that, I do also just want to let people know that you can get a forecast, a quick 2021 personal assessment, as you see on the screen here. I did want to just let people see that as well. A lot of people are getting those because we are going through some very transformative times, obviously, with all these planets in Capricorn and whatnot right now. And then we go into the rest of the year. I'll put here, again, I've been making sure people see this because I do a 2021 forecast every year, and people see these 10 shifts that I talk about. We got the whole year ahead. We're right here now. So we got all these other things. So if you haven't gotten that, you should also get it. But when I do these assessments, it's actually looking at your chart and looking at your dashas and your nature and seeing how these shifts are going to influence you, and these planetary shifts, especially things like the nodes, Saturn cycles, Jupiter cycles, and whatnot. So you can check that out if you want to put the link in the description. But one of the things just in general, and I'm going to talk about Pluto and where we're going now and some of the things that are showing up for us. But in general, the way I look at Pluto in a societal way or in a cultural way is that we can really see it as how plutocrats and oligarchs use power. Now, again, this is in the cultural way. I'm not talking about it as a personal planet, talking about it globally, conceptually, and big shifts that we have. You see, it's about 13 to 15 years. Well, here it was about 12 years. By the way, I want to thank one of my students, Sarah Charalambos. It's a tough name to say. For putting this together. She has a website at locascienceoflight.com. She got these dates together for me. But, it's usually about 12 years or so. Sometimes it's a little longer. This is about 13. This one was about off and on. This one was about 15, as, again, Pluto will poke his head in another sign and then go back again and whatnot. And now we're in Pluto in Capricorn. But and again, these are sidereal signs. And what I noticed years ago was looking at Pluto as it goes in and out of sidereal signs, we can see these shifts in how authoritarians and plutocrats and oligarchs, or people in power, how they use power. And this is also, again, this also meshes with how Pluto is delineated in classical astrology as well. It's where the power, it's kind of like Saturn on overdrive, the power of time, but it's more hidden and psychological and internal and things like that. And again, but it's about a 12 to 13 year shift as it goes through these different signs. And we can see that Pluto, if I go through and look at these eras, we can see how it's been affecting since even the late 60s. Okay, so again, I have some references. Again, I'm an American. I kind of reference a lot of things around U.S., but also other global events as well. But we can see, for example, Pluto in Virgo from September 68 to December 80, transformation and shattering the structure and reorganization of the 60s. The EPA was established, the great era of music of the 70s. You can see this is late 60s to 1980. So again, coming out of the 60s, 1968, was when the 60s kind of was in their last sort of hurrah. And when I say 60s, I mean all that idealism from the 60s started to become more tangible then. After 68, again, we had the moon landing, we had Woodstock, we had a few culminating events. And then we got into the 70s. But what also happened is there was a lot of shifts around, like, again, culturally around music and those other kinds of, that sort of great era of music, and especially how well it was crafted. Because I'm a musician, I kind of notice these things. Very, very Virgo-like, where it's all put together, those 3-minute songs that are little masterpieces, very Virgo-like. And these were the presidents of Nixon and Carter. Nixon from 68 to like 74, or no, and then you had Ford also, and then Carter. So again, this was really took us through the 70s. Pluto was in Virgo. Then from 1980 to like 1992, these are Reagan Bush years. These are 12 years of Ronald Reagan and George Bush, and also conservatism around the world, and also materialism. And again, this was like Margaret Thatcher in England. There was a lot of, in the 80s, there was a lot of fear of like nuclear weapons, and also, a lot of globalism and sort of diplomacy. Terrorism started to really rise in the Middle East. There was a whole lot of stuff going on. But the main features is during this time, there was a transformation and shattering of the Soviet Union. This was one of the biggest shifts, because the Soviet Union fell in like 1989. By the end of this time of Pluto in Libra, and a new conservatism and materialism happened sort of to coincide. Now, it's interesting because this was Libra. And again, Libra is about diplomacy. Libra is about making an agreement, making striking a bargain and a negotiation. And you can see think what we want to about the effectiveness of Reagan, Cold War era, diplomacy or whatnot. By the end of that time, it actually brought the Soviet Union down. Again, that was one of the largest political movements. That was huge because it showed all this transformation in Europe, like, Romania and Yugoslavia. And in fact, it broke apart Yugoslavia, which led to the genocide in that part of the world by the time we got to the early 90s and, the Clinton and early Bush years. But so Pluto in Libra, again, this is why I say something like how plutocrats and oligarchs use power. Again, I'm going over this kind of quickly. I could spend a lot more time on this, but I don't want to be here for 3 hours. I'm just giving ideas here about how the power structures are operating. And here it's very much like this pressure of diplomacy, and again, using it to in a sort of, even in like an authoritative way. One of the things you notice is you can bring a kind of difficult sort of negative connotation, negative in a kind of strict sense of how Pluto, it winds up looking like a sort of negative shadow side of whatever the sign is. So like the negative shadow side of Libra and diplomacy would be using diplomacy like an iron fist. Like we're going to threaten nuclear war. I mean, this was really looming in the 80s. And the whole arms race. And then there was eventually diplomacy. The Soviets were scared that because we advanced so much in the West. So anyway, you see Pluto shows a real kind of underbelly of those kinds of things. Just like Pluto in Virgo here throughout the 70s, what wound up started happening is power started to get consolidated also in a very Virgo way. So by the time Ronald Reagan came in the 80s, there was a lot of things that kind of that sort of put a lid on all of that hippie crap in the 60s. Those plutocrats were like, and they're even called plutocrats, they were like, whoa, we better start monkeying around with the system so we can get these hippies under control or something. We didn't see this coming. So again, in the late 60s up through 1980, Pluto energy kind of took the Virgo skill and precision and kind of learned how to concentrate power a little bit more. Pluto in Libra, it was aligned more toward bringing this pressure onto diplomacy, world diplomacy, and there was a lot of conservatism around the world at that time in the 80s, up to early 90s. These are literally Reagan Bush years in the U.S., literally. Then we have Pluto in Scorpio from Clinton until the first Bush term was almost up. Now, again, this is Pluto in Scorpio. So again, it's like hidden enemies. This is the time of terrorism. It hits the West. Now, again, it's not just planes flying into the World Trade Center. There was an earlier World Trade Center bombing that happened in 1994, I think, right? Where a bomb exploded in the stair in the garage. Then there was the coal. These all happened when Clinton was still president, and then 2001, of course, we had the 9/11. But it was also the rise of the internet era, also the genocide in Europe that I talked about that came after the Soviets fell. Yugoslavia broke apart, and then you had Croats and Serbs and whatnot with that. Then there was also like a big shift in music, like hip hop, that kind of era, and female artists and empowerment also came through the late 90s, especially and into the early 2000s. You had a lot of the boy bands and girl bands and Alanis Morissette and these kinds of Lilith Fair and all that stuff. Now, again, it's kind of interesting that, these, and again, they're not always, I'm not saying all of it is always related to, Pluto, but I'm just kind of looking at the cultural trends as well. And at least with what I would say with the rise of like the hip hop and what we would call the black music became elevated a lot more. Again, this is in Scorpio, which really shows a lot of that darker, especially a lot of the messages from the original rap music, especially gangster rap and all that, really started to really penetrate the culture and really permeate the culture through the early 90s. And so, again, you can see Pluto in Scorpio. This is a huge transformational time from the beginning of Bill Clinton, his 2 terms, and the first George Bush term here in the U.S. That takes you all the way from, like, again, early 90s. Rodney King, which was actually still up here in Pluto and Libra. We had that, like the Rodney King riots and the race relations, becoming very important, all the way up through like the internet era. And again, look at the internet. It's actually very kind of Scorpio-like. It was really developed during this time, developed into something much bigger. And again, you look at what people, not just what they're doing on the internet, but how it was developed at this time. Because it was being developed, and it's people by themselves in their house, coders, secret stuff. I don't know if you remember when the internet first came out, but there was so much of like, so much of it was scamming, and people were, there was a lot of fears and worries that, when you get on the internet, people are going to steal, are going to hack you. There's still those fears, but particularly when it first started, again, I remember in the early 90s when you first started to get on AOL, that people are getting addicted to it. There was all this paranoia and fear about what's the internet going to do. Some ways they were kind of right, to be paranoid and worried about it. But again, it was that part of the internet. By the end of 92, by the time we hit 2005, it had normalized, it had become a huge industry and whatnot. So, but you can see this era of Pluto and Scorpio as, again, in particular in the world, it was the rise of terrorism in the West. Also, again, major involvements, we're about to have like major involvements in the East. They actually started there in the Middle East, of course, with after 9/11, then the U.S. and different parts of the world started occupying areas in the Middle East. That still goes on today. But we just got out of the Pluto in Sag, which was from February 2005 to 2020, 2021. Again, these dates, they poke their head in, and and then it goes back. Pluto is a slow transit, so it barely moves a couple degrees a year in aggregate. But since this time, we really saw the rise of fanaticism, endless Middle East war activity. Again, a lot of it started here, even with Al-Qaeda and all that. A lot of it started with Pluto and Scorpio, I should say. A lot of it started up here with Pluto and Scorpio. But now, as we get to 2005, 2021, it starts becoming a lot more. ISIS and literally, especially after occupations in the Middle East, endless Middle East war activity, religiosity. We can also see this not just in the Middle East. We see the rise of the Tea Party. We see the reemergence of racism in the Western world, authoritarianism worldwide. Again, here in the U.S. now, we have our right-wing white supremacist ideologies, and racism has reemerged very strong, shockingly to many of us. But Not so surprising to many of us as well. When Barack Obama got elected, so much racist backlash against him, from birtherism to the Tea Party movement to, pictures of him as a monkey and all this kind. I mean, it was right below the surface, but it really exploded since Pluto and Sag. Again, you have to understand, Sagittarius, those of you listen to me know I say all the time, it's about what we believe and what inspires us. To people that think like that, that ideology is what inspires them. That white people are the best. They're the ones. The other ones are not. That is Sagittarius as well. It's getting fired up about a belief, about our beliefs. Doesn't mean the beliefs are good. It's what gets us fired up. And again, we saw this rise of Pluto and Sag since February 2005 of fanaticism in many ways, religiosity, fired up about our religions. Again, that includes things like the Tea Party, which was a hardcore right-wing political movement. We also have the fanatical left, absolutely, like the fanatical left wing that leads to things like Antifa type of, acting out, but also extreme left-wing policies as well, political correctness, that those things that have just gone haywire as well on the left. Fanaticism is the key. Fanaticism. We're coming out of an era of polarized fanaticism, which is, again, Pluto and Sag. Now we get into Pluto and Capricorn, 2021. And like I said, we have that Pluto return in the U.S. chart. And again, we're even talking about things like the Great Reset. I say Great Reset in U.S. because literally it's a return. It's a U.S. return. Pluto has come back to the first house of the U.S. chart. That's a reset. Right? And a new relationship with money and authority, opportunities for ecology are in front of us. Climate change, fair economic systems, seeds, food, illness need to be addressed. So there's a lot of things, and I just threw it all into a bucket here because I'm going to just kind of talk about it. But our monetary systems, the fiat capital that isn't backed up by anything. Again, if we go back even back through all of these times, our monetary systems were all based on some version of fiat capital and banksters and the Fed in the U.S. And again, this global agreement that money is worth something. It's not backed up by hard assets. It's all fiat. Now we have this emergence of blockchain money reorienting our relationship with not just with money as an asset, but as a commodity, as a resource, and also with real, what's actually real, especially when it comes to what we're doing with money. Like, again, purchasing food, our relationship with the earth. These are some of the biggest things that we absolutely are going to have to address in the next 15 to 20, 10 to 20 years. When Pluto leaves Capricorn. We can run that in a second when I bring up the chart. But now, all of the other stuff, it's a reset here in the U.S., but also we have to see what Capricorn is. Notice how the pressure of all of these things have now come upon us. Pluto is now set up in Capricorn for good. He's not going to go retrograde back into Sagittarius, I don't think. Pretty sure he's not. And what it means is that we're in this now, and we're about to totally change the climate beyond recognition. By the time Pluto goes through Capricorn, 13 years or whatever it is from now, we're going to have a different relationship with global warming and all of that. And we got to start doing it now. We got to start changing now. And we're feeling the pressure to change globally now, for sure. I did want to bring this up. I saw this, and I made the prediction last year when COVID started, which was Saturn going into Capricorn, that the next few years, because Saturn is a 2-year transit, 2 to 3 year transit, was going to be a time to really reevaluate and reassess our relationship with these very things as well, because Saturn is the ruler of Capricorn, right? And again, this is all these Capricorn values, which again include money, the earth, our commitments, and getting real, waking up to the truth about what's going on. I've been talking about that a lot. I don't need to go over that so much, but Capricorn is the consequences of our actions. And most immediately, the consequences of all these beliefs we have. We all have these fanatical beliefs from Sagittarius. Well, eventually they have a consequence. We believe a whole bunch of things. Well, we have to pay the piper at some point. Saturn and especially Capricorn is where we really start to do that, and we have to buckle down, right? And so, with that in mind, of course, that includes things like, again, our food sources, our sustainability. And I just saw this. I don't want to traumatize people. There he is. There's your favorite guy. Woohoo! No. But I just saw this thing yesterday that says, again, Bill Gates, all rich countries should move to 100% synthetic beef. Now, again, I don't eat synthetic beef. I don't think it's a great alternative. But the alternative to this, and Bill Gates is talking literally about the fact that we need to stop the factory farming. We need to stop for the ecology, for the planet. We cannot keep doing these same things that we've been doing. All countries should transition to synthetic beef in order to significantly curb the greenhouse gas emissions driving climate change. Again, he couldn't care less about the health issue or the humanity issue, which is also important. He's talking about for global change. Interview, he said, his fund, Breakthrough Venture, said U.S. switching to plant-based meats like those sold by Impossible Foods and Beyond Meat will be required for saving the planet. Now, again, what would be better is to not need to have some kind of beef substitute because you want to taste it, but those options being there, and someone like Bill Gates, who is this prominent, to come out and go right at it, it kind of shocked me because, I wasn't expecting that. I said it last year that it's time where we're going to have to start addressing this and start phasing out this factory farming, which destroys the ecology, water, emits all these methane gases. It just ravages the environment, clear-cutting the forest just to eat meat, not to mention wasting all of our food to feed the cow so the cow can poop everywhere and destroy the land, emit methane, and then it's not even healthy. This is a horrible practice, and we got to stop doing it. It's not optional. We're going to have to stop at some point. The planet will not let us keep doing it. So at the very least, to keep for Gates to come out, someone this prominent to come out this boldly, I'm shocked, frankly. But again, this is pretty remarkable because we're going to have to shift away from these unsustainable living practices. And so this, this is just remarkable. By the way, I'm going to ignore all the Bill Gates hate. And I plotted up there, look, I'll just flat out say, I don't eat that kind of meat. And it would be great if people can think beyond their projections maybe a little bit without seeming to lecture people. But I'm looking at the principle, okay? And Bill Gates is self-interested. Let's not pretend. He is a plutocrat. He's an oligarch. He's an autocrat in all of those kinds of... It's absolutely true, okay? I'm talking about the trend, and I'm talking about the fact that we're now talking about this is good. And absolutely, I don't think Bill Gates should be the one to do it. Nobody in their right mind does. But who would have thought that some big industrial leader would come out and say, we need to stop factory farming? You know how much money that is? Do you know? And we do. He does seem to get it on that level very clearly. Because he could just invest in all that stuff too. He can make his money any way he wants. And I also know he's invested in seeds and GMOs. I know all of it. So I'm looking at the bigger picture of what the trend means. So I'm just going to leave that aside. And I'm aware of it. Trust me. I'm totally aware of it. But we also have to see and realize what a shift that is. That, again, Pluto has moved into Capricorn. We definitely, like I said last year, it's going to be the next 10 to 12 years or so. We got to get this economic thing or this ecological thing worked out. We don't have that much longer to just keep destroying the planet. We simply can't. And no one talks about no one talks about the factory farming. And it's just as bad, if not worse, than the carbon emissions. Just as bad, if not worse. And no one ever talks about it. Everybody talks about the fuel emissions, but no one has been talking about this. So The fact that he's talking about it, and right in the someone, maybe the most prominent man in the world, maybe the most famous man in the world, is saying all rich nations need to stop making beef. 100%. Like, wow. So, one second, hang on. So, just to have that shift is what I'm saying is really pretty remarkable. And so, again, I definitely see this as a Capricorn, as a Pluto and Capricorn movement, which also, again, my eyes are wide open, because I'm not saying it's, oh, now we're saved. No. Remember what I said here is that how plutocrats and oligarchs use power. We have to be careful, because, like I also said, we have to be careful that the plutocrats and the oligarchs, in all their well-meaning ways, which they're not always well-meaning at all, but we see the shift. We see the recognition there that we need to do something different. And a recognition that factory farming is killing the planet is a great start. And we also need to have our eyes open that we don't want people like Bill Gates running the world and eating his GMO Franken foods or whatever it might be as well. Absolutely. It's all there. Talking about one doesn't mean you're not looking at the other. Again, one of the things that's frustrated me, and I'm glad, and I hope that with Pluto not in Sagittarius anymore, and things not so fanatical, that you can actually talk about something without having everyone's fanatical beliefs go bonkers. Because now, again, everything is such a polarized, crazy situation that you can't even acknowledge things sometimes without it turning into like everybody's trigger. So yes, it's great in my view, not only that it happens so fast, but we also have to start, but I think what I'm hopeful about in that sense is that more focus being given to something like this, again, because nobody was even thinking about this, and I don't know how much traction it's going to get, but he's a very prominent person, and more focus being put on this idea is only going to lead to innovation, meaning better ways, not just to innovate and make fake beef taste good or whatever. Frankly, I'm not even thinking on that level. I don't care about the fake meat. And I also know that it's not necessarily so healthy and nutritious. There's a lot of sodium. It also has soy. It could be GMO, seed, soy, and all that. I get all of that. But the alternative is much worse. The alternative is unsustainable. We cannot keep factory farming, not just for its destruction of the planet, but for the why does my camera keep, sorry, one more time, let me do this again. I don't know why the camera keeps doing this. 1 second. 1 second, we'll get it. One second. I'm going to have to use the camera down here. So anyway, but so again, it's not just that that we do it because of the for the ecological reasons, which we must, but it's also because of the cruelty. So again, this is not a either or. And as someone said, Bill Gates is going to make money no matter what. It's true. His life is to make money. That's what he's here to do. He's here to make money, and he's going to make money no matter what. And so it's better that he's making money on something that's helpful. And again, I'm not going to talk about Bill Gates anymore. I just showed you the thing. So I'm showing it as a trend, okay? And I think it's a positive one because we need to be looking at things like this. And so again, just to show the, let me show the share screen. Let me go and show the chart again. So again, we can see how Pluto, okay, so like the Pluto shifts, again, as we see, this is the chart of the US. This is July 4, 1776. And this is the chart right now. Let me bring up the change time toolbar. Okay. And so, again, if we go over, I'm going to go over the next few years and see when Pluto, if it forward. Oops, let me do it here. 1 second. Yeah, so it's not going to go back. It's in Capricorn. It's settled for good. And then it's in, oh, sorry, that's the wrong chart. Oh, I did have it right. 1 second. Here we go. Okay. All right, it's this one. So it goes into, so it's going to leave in, this is 2038, like 2039, 2040. Well, that can't be right. Why is that about 20 years? What's going on here? $2035, 36. So it looks like, I don't know why this says a 2039. Well, someone run that for me. It shouldn't be 20 years in this sign. It should be only about 15 years. It should be till like 2035 or so. But anyway, so this time of Pluto going through Capricorn, again, we have a time to really try to get our relationship to the earth and the, organizing these large financial systems, which is also a big part of it. Our monetary system, our, sustainability, as we all should know, for the next, 10 to 15 years or so at least, is going to really be crucial and up for grabs. And a big part of that is going to be transitioning out of the unconscious, again, meat-eating, animal-driven way. Again, what do we think progress is going to look like in this day and age? It's going to come in some ways from the people that have the money or have the power, and then it will spur on others to start thinking this way. Again, people aren't even thinking about things at this point now. Someone just put basic income. Yeah, it could be these kinds of solutions, right? These kinds of solutions where we look at something like, let's say, universal basic income or other things that where we have to have a new relationship with capitalism. Here's another big key word with Capricorn. We have to look at things like capitalism, which is, it's like the real religion. The real religion of the Western world is not Christianity, it's capitalism and consumerism. And look at what it's done. It's driven us to the point of destroying the earth. And the consequences of that is what we're looking at with this Capricorn energy. The consequences of consumerism and capitalism is what we're dealing with now. As we can see, again, as I'm recording this now here in February 2021, if we go forward, this will be next year. Saturn is still in Capricorn, as you can see. So I initially made these predictions last year. If we go back last year, when Saturn first put its head in Capricorn, I said the next couple years are going to be really showing the consequences of our relationship with nature, our relationship with the earth, our relationship to money and values and what we value and all of this stuff. And I said I'm hopeful that it will lead to things like more, vegetarianism and more investment in the earth because these things are unsustainable. As soon as COVID happened, I said the same thing, that it's a zoonotic virus that always is us interacting with other animals. If anything, this is a wake-up call for us to get right with nature. And amazing, again, this was last year over here, this chart, and you can see last year Pluto was here. Let me make this bigger. Last year, you could see Pluto was at 29 at this time last year, right? 29.48. So again, we go forward a year. This is where we are now. He's actually gone in there. So again, shortly after Pluto actually goes in there and joins Saturn in Capricorn, again, that's when we see things like Gates making this announcement. I hope and I think that it's going to start to raise consciousness around these things to where, again, all it takes, I've said this the entire time, that we're just mindless. I think most of, especially meat eating and whatnot, is just habit. And again, if you offer people something that tastes just as good, they'll eat it if they really want to keep that taste in their mouth or whatever. And again, but for other people, what it will do is spur on a healthier eating trend. And by the way, all of those companies, Impossible Meats and Beyond Meat or whatever those companies are, they can't keep their product on the shelf now since COVID. That stuff is flying off the shelf now because people realize, and they're starting to get healthier. They're starting to realize and starting to investigate these things more. So again, this is definitely a huge advantage of going through COVID and realizing how interconnected everything is. And again, we're also getting much more severe weather. We can't run away from this anymore. This is the urgent issue of our time. And again, people keep acting like we have forever, like, well, whatever, or that, well, but I don't like the taste of that or this or that, or I don't know, we're not going to have a choice at some point. If something is unsustainable, it's unsustainable. Just like oil, petrodollars and all that, it's not sustainable. So again, I see this huge shift happening now, just like we saw with the last transit through Sagittarius, that we've just come from this hyper fanaticism, religiosity since 2005, and the polarizing and the kind of fanaticism around our own, whether it's religion or politics or whatever it is, we're so polarized. We're going to have to come together as a globe to try to find a way to solve this. Now, again, there's also going to be a lot of excesses. I'm talking about this part of it. But again, also, we see a lot of authoritarianism still in the world. And again, the next 10 to 12 years, I think, again, we have rise of global powers like China, and they're not what you would call capitalist in that sense, at least their monetary systems. And, India is becoming much more authoritarian. We have a lot of this authoritarianism right now in the world. And Capricorn is a sign where we see power concentrated like that. I think this is the big fear of the next decade, is just really descending into authoritarianism around the world. We almost had it here in US, at least with our whatever we might, and I'm even talking about the last president, although definitely he has those authoritarian tendencies to just flat out say that he won and we're going to take power and not care. Who knows about the upcoming elections? Again, this idea of maybe just seizing power and having authoritarian mechanisms is a real scary prospect with Pluto going through Capricorn, because like I said, what Pluto tends to do, what I've noticed, the influence is to bring out the darker side of the potential on a cultural level. And again, this is definitely a danger that we need to watch for, and we also see it that way. And someone just said, what about cryptocurrency and Pluto? Yes, I definitely see the rise of things like cryptocurrencies more. And in fact, when you look at the chart of Bitcoin, it has a Cancer ascendant and planets in Capricorn. So it's not. Again, I don't know if it's Bitcoin, but the rise of cryptocurrencies, or at least if not their widespread usage, but at least the need not just for cryptocurrency, but for blockchain technology in a lot of ways. It could even be that each of us has our own blockchain, or somehow that blockchain is is um, is used in elections, used in a lot of other ways. But that kind of technology, that very locked in, again, even blockchain, very Capricorn words, because these things are locked. And again, that's very Capricorn way. But again, we also have to look at not just authoritarian leaders, but authoritarian structures and systems like, uh, the things that we fear and worry about, like the uh, all this restrictions on our freedoms and travel, and under the excuse of things like pandemics or other kinds of stuff. There's no doubt that the possibility definitely exists for more authoritarian control. Again, I just keep using that word because that's the concept to think about. We don't is the exploitation of those things. So the way I see Pluto's influence as it moves through these signs is to bring out the potential to exploit and to work in a subversive way, maybe in a hidden way, also in a hidden way, where we might not notice it. Like we haven't noticed, again, by the last few years of Pluto going through Sagittarius, we've definitely noticed more fanaticism is the word. Again, but it creeps up on you. And again, Pluto is hidden. And this tracks with how Pluto is also analyzed in classical Western astrology as something that is works in a kind of subversive way and then kind of creeps up on you. So again, these are the things that we're looking at and that we can see in the world now, these Capricorn themes of how much oppression or domination from the government because of COVID or whatever it is, how much of that should we just accept without questioning? Now, again, I'm not saying, by the way, that we have experienced a level that's irrational. Frankly, I haven't seen that. I've always been looking, and especially because you look at countries that handled COVID, for example, really well. And again, I'm in America, but I'm not in a bubble. I look at so many countries because, again, you look at Australia, New Zealand, and many countries in Asia where they identify this as something that they need to protect against, and they used measures that work, and their response and their reaction to COVID, because it's a virus, has been extremely effective. Here in the US, it hasn't been. So our reaction to it has been irrational, which again, most of that had to do with our previous leader constantly fomenting that it's a hoax and all this stuff, and so many people buying into it, and it's still going on. So I think that all of the overreaction to the fact that the governments are trying to oppress us and, in reaction to COVID is a phenomena that's mainly from the US and the Western world, because I don't think anybody wants this, and I don't think the government wants us to be doing that. That doesn't mean that I'm not watching, or that they're not watching and saying, look how quickly we can get them in their homes. All of it's work. All of that is playing out. That's always playing out. But again, that's always the case anyway. That's always the case, is that the structures that are in power are always trying to get more of it, always trying to get more money. There's no reason to even make a big deal about that part, because that's just built into it in every situation. So all I'm saying here is that with Pluto now really set up in Capricorn, I start looking for shifts, and at least subversively, like behind the scenes. And these are the things that we really need to be looking at. And so this is what I wanted to say here. And I'm frustrated myself because of these technical problems. So my Mercury retrograde, these are my Mercury retrograde issues today. But anyway, I'm going to put, if people want to get the that assessment that I talked about here, you can do that. I'll share the screen again. Again, it's very easy. I don't even have the screen. Jeez. Technical problems today, Sam. My Lord. I usually don't have any. They usually work really well, but this is the retrograde, Mercury retrograde. Let's see that. Let's blame it on that. Let's see, we can blame it on that. I don't like to blame anything on anything, but once in a while, why not? Let's see. See this Mercury retrograde here? This is what we got. Let me even get another chart here. Oops. One chart large, add screen. Oops. Oh, look, I'm just not doing. Look at this. Man, you guys, you're getting a treat today. You're getting all the foibles here. One chart large. Okay, there it is. And it's the wrong one. I'm going to do it. I'm not giving up. Birth data. Now. Oh, oops. I'm going to do it. I'm not giving up. Birth data. No, we're going to make it now. Wait a minute. Cancel. We're going to do new. I'm going to do it. I'm not giving up. You're not going to defeat me. Okay, there it is. And then this. I'm sticking with it. One chart large. There it is. Here's what I'm going to show you. That right now, it's this one. So these are my technical problems. This is why I'm having technical problems. Right here. Mercury retrograde. And I think he's about to station. I think he's stationary. Change time toolbar. Let's see. Change time toolbar. We'll add day. Let's watch his degrees. Let me see. Let's watch his degrees. 1723. If I go forward tomorrow, 1705. 1655. Look, stationary. He's stationary direct. That's why. He's hardly moving at all, right? This was yesterday. Today, 1723. Tomorrow, 1705. 1655. And then no longer. So you could see, I knew I would look at this. He's retrograde. It's my 8th house. Stationary direct. He's also, well, that's not combust because oh yeah, the sun is up here, but he's also close to Jupiter, which is, again, pretty, Jupiter and Mercury are kind of not so friendly to each other. So anyway, yeah, we also got this stuff, right? We also have this robotics, AI, transhumanism, Elon Musk with chips in the human brain, Pluto and Cap. Yes, these are the same kinds of things. We got to watch these corporate, again, the sort of corporatist kind of, the oligarchs. Again, it could be very subversive. This is the stuff I'm talking about. I'm glad someone brought this up. Thank you, guys. I appreciate that for bringing up some of this stuff here as well. But yes, this is also huge things. Now, again, you'll also remember I did an update. You don't remember, but I did an update about these times that we're living. It was the Saturn-Jupiter conjunction that just happened. The last time we had this Saturn-Jupiter at the end of Sagittarius and in Capricorn was at the beginning of the 60s. And that was a time of great innovation. We went to the moon. That was the space race. It was that new era of hope in the early 60s. And I said that these times right now are very similar in a lot of ways, and they are. Elon Musk and this new robotics, AI, again, even perhaps this innovation in, we have all kinds of it now with GMO foods and stuff. Again, these are quote innovations, but they're also dangerous. We need to be careful with this very dangerous technology that we don't have a lot of control over. And yes, this AI race where we don't know what we're doing with this stuff is dangerous. And so, especially in the next decade or so, by the time Saturn goes into Aquarius, we could start to see some real dangers. And yes, AI is a huge problem and issues. So someone said, would I ever look at divisional charts and analyzing world events? if it's an event, but I'm not looking at an actual event this moment. And I don't do it as much because it's kind of specious to wonder how much divisional charts should be used in transits. I don't want to open that up too much, but in this case, I wouldn't, because I'm just talking about large general trends. I don't, in my practice, I don't. There's so much, and most is known by looking at the sky directly. That's what you're looking at. Divisional charts are mainly, in my view, for natal astrology. But I'm not saying people can't do it. You ask if I do it, I generally don't. And you're welcome for answering. So sometimes I be here to do some answers, and So anyway, folks, I'm going to let it go at that, and I appreciate people showing up and being here, and I hope this was helpful. And you all take care.